Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to look through the 2025 English Grammar Punctuation Test. This test is one that they will do in their Year 6 SATs alongside a spelling test to get an overall pass mark for grammar. So let's have a look at what the pass marks are and what they were last year. If you look here at the grammar scores, you can see clearly that grammar tends to remain about the same. You've got a pass mark of 36 in 2017, and it doesn't really change then until present day 2025. You've got all of them here. I mean, it went up a little bit in 2018, but last year's was 35. The greater depth score also doesn't change too much. You've got a score of 54 here, which is similar to the others. Now, that's not a high score, I don't think, and it's easily achievable, and let me explain why. So you've got two tests, and the grammar pass mark is basically those two tests combined. So spelling, apologies, is not out of 40, is actually out of 20, and grammar is out of 50. So let's say that you got 10 in your spelling, but then you would only need 25 in your grammar to get the pass mark of 35. Equally, if you were finding spelling very difficult, I had a child last year who found it tricky. If they got 0 in their spelling, but they got 36 out of 50 in their grammar, then technically they would still pass. I mean, we hope that children score, about 15 in the spelling and then around 36 or above in grammar. And it also gives an opportunity to possibly get greater depth. So I think grammar is a pretty fair test. If you can revise for it and learn what it is you need to learn, you can do really well on this paper. So I'm going to walk through the grammar paper from last year, and hopefully you'll be able to understand how to answer the questions, and I'll explain some of the content that's needed to do really well. So first of all, they get this page. The grammar test is 45 minutes long, and they have 50 questions to answer. Some of the questions are multiple choice, some of them are just drawing lines or writing short answers. Some of them require a bit longer of an answer. But interestingly, each question is only worth 1 mark. So even though they have to do many things to get that question, they'd still only need 1 mark, get 1 mark for writing that correct answer. So let's have a look then at the first few questions. What does the prefix anti mean in the word anti-clockwise? So prefixes are things that we add to the beginnings of words to change the meaning, and the word anti is changing the word clockwise. So clockwise is going in one direction, anti-clockwise means we're going in the opposite direction, doesn't it? So anti often means opposite. We can tick that as the correct answer. Circle a word that is a synonym of the word bumpy. So synonym, I like to say to children that synonyms mean same, because we've got the S and the S there. Antonyms mean opposites, but if you're asked for a synonym, you're looking for a word that means the same. So the word is bumpy. Sore, no, I don't think it means sore. Smooth doesn't mean smooth, it's the opposite of smooth. Low, no, it doesn't mean that either. But a bumpy surface can often be an uneven surface. So we can circle that word as the correct answer. Okay, next question. We've got tick one box to show where the question mark is needed in the sentence below. Have you finished eating your lunch? Asked Hannah. So we've got some speech here, and then somewhere here we need to put the question mark. Now, children should learn that question marks go inside the speech marks, and the end of the question is here, so I'm going to tick this box. Don't put the question mark in there because it says here to tick, okay? Tick one box in each row to show whether the sentence is a statement or a command. Now, I like to say that commands are like bossy sentences, like someone telling you to do something. They often have a bossy verb in there, or we call these imperative verbs. Statements are just like facts, like that jumper is blue. So which of these are statements, which of them are commands? Watch where you're going. What you watched the game together. Well, that's a statement. We can tick that one. My watch stopped working is also a statement. Do not watch too much television. That is definitely bossy. Okay, that is a command. And the first one, watch where you're going, is also quite bossy. So that is also a command. Let's move on. Question 5 then, insert 2 commas in the correct places in the sentence below. Commas can be used to separate clauses. They can also be used after to list. And in this case, we're using them to list. We lifted up the log and found worms, wood lice, snails, and slugs. So when we're using them to list, they would go here and here. Question number 6, which punctuation mark could be used at the end of the sentence below? I can't wait to look after the school rabbit for the weekend. So this sentence here is a bit of excitement. I think it shows that this person's quite excited. So whenever we're writing a sentence where somebody is excited about something, we would use an exclamation mark. It's definitely not a question. Couldn't put a comma there. Couldn't put a colon. So the obvious answer is exclamation mark. Okay, question number 7. Circle the correct verb form in each underlined pair to complete the sentence in standard English. I like to think and say to the children that standard English just means that, it makes sense. When you read it, it makes sense. If it's not in standard English, it means something's not making sense there. Sometimes the verb is wrong, the tense. We was going on a school trip to a concert. We were. Now, whenever we're talking about more than one person, we would use were, not was. If it was I, we could say I was going on a school trip. But because it's more than one person, we need to use were. So this is the correct verb. The musicians did a sound check before the show. The musicians done a sound check before the show. Straight away, done does not sound correctly when you read this out. Also, this sentence is written in the past tense, and the past tense of the word done is did. So this is the correct verb. We need to circle there. Question 8. So we've got a semicolon question here. The children need to know how to use a semicolon in year 6. And that's why this question is on the grammar paper. A semicolon is used to separate two clauses, but two main clauses. And I like to say that you could swap a coordinating conjunction like an and or a but for a semicolon. Semicolon must go between two related clauses as well that have some connection in meaning, and they have to be main clauses, really. We have been learning about the Vikings. They were a fascinating civilization. So straight away, you could have a full stop here, but because this second part is related to the first part, we can use a semicolon there. And when you read it, it sounds like that's where the pause would go. Okay. Question number 9. Tick all the sentences that must end with a question mark. Okay, so there's going to be more than one because it says all here. So you need to tick more than one in that case. How good it would be if Jay could come. Yeah, how good would it be if Jay could come? Do we think that is a question? I'm not sure about that one. Is Jay going to come on Tuesday? That's definitely a question. All right, because it needs an answer. Jay asked if we could meet him on Tuesday. I don't think that is a question, but it's trying to trick the children by putting the word asked in there. Do you know if Jay is coming on Tuesday? Now, that is definitely a question. It's very difficult here because it's not saying tick 2, it's saying tick all, but we've got to just read them very carefully. And I like to say to the children, which one is demanding an answer from you? Which one do you need to give an answer for? Is Jay coming on Tuesday? Yes, that needs an answer. Do you know if Jay is coming on Tuesday? That needs an answer. So these are both questions. Question number 10. Insert a pair of brackets in the correct place in the sentence below. Our class visited a castle, the oldest in the country, to help us with our history project. Now, brackets are a type of parenthesis. Okay, parenthesis. And parenthesis is used to add extra information to a sentence. Usually, you can take out that information, the sentence would still make sense. Our class visited the castle, the oldest in the country, to help us with our history project. Now, if we take that section out, our class visited a castle to help us with our history project, you can see that it still makes sense. So that tells me that's the extra information, and that's the information that's been added and needs the brackets around it. Okay, so question 11. Circle the most formal option in each underlined pair below. Complete the passage. So we're going to read these, and the most formal means, and I like to say to the children, it sounds posh. It sounds as if you weren't talking to a friend, you were talking to a teacher, or maybe you were talking to somebody important like the king or queen. Okay, so the basketball club was set up or established by a group of friends. Now, straight away, this is much more formal, much more posh, and set up would be something that I might say to my friends. It's a bit less formal. They got people who were interested in the game to join. Definitely invited in this case. Got is very informal. Now they compete in their local league. Compete is much more formal than play. Okay, so those would be the correct answers for that question. Question 12. Which sentence starts with an adverbial? Now, interestingly, these kinds of questions can throw children because they've learned in primary school about fronted adverbials, which they believe always go at the start of sentences because they're fronted. And often, that's how they learn about adverbials. But if they're taught, they should be taught actually that an adverbial can come anywhere in the sentence, and it usually tells us when, where, or how something is happening. So, In this case, it might come at the front, but I'm just saying it might not always. She is feeling tired, so Cal is going to her room. They've put a comma in here to try and trick you because the children learn that a comma comes after the front adverbial. But this isn't telling us when, where, or how something is happening. After dinner, comma, Cal is going to her room. Now this one does tell us when something is happening. We've got a comma there. So this is likely to be our front adverbial, but we'll just check the other two just in case. Aaron told me that Cal is going to her room. No. I wonder when Cal is going to her room. No. So the second one would be correct. Question number 13. Which sentence is the most formal? So again, we've got this formal we need to recognize, and I'm looking for something that sounds posh or something I would say to the king or queen. I'm using quite technical vocabulary when I'm looking for formal language. So also, another thing is, if it has a contraction, it can't be formal. Okay, so we don't use contractions in formal writing. So this is definitely not formal. Kick-off is at 2 p.m. Doesn't sound too formal. The coach has yet to announce the team. Right, we've got some technical vocab. Announce. The coach has yet. Also, we're referring to him as the proper coach here. I really hope I'll be playing. Again, a contraction, so it can't be that. I don't think it's the second one. It's got to be the third one. Question number 14. What punctuation could be used instead of brackets in the sentence below? Now remember, brackets are a type of parenthesis, and parentheses are used to add extra information to sentences. Okay, and different ways of adding brackets. Okay, you add brackets in a pair. You can also add dashes in a pair, and you can also add commas in a pair, and they go around the extra information. Tokyo, the capital of Japan, is one of the largest cities in the world. Well, we don't use hyphens, parenthesis. We don't use colons or semicolons for parenthesis, so the correct answer has to be dashes. Question number 15. Insert a colon into the correct place in the sentence below. Now a colon, which are these two dots here, they're used for before a list. So if you were writing a list, you could put a colon. They could also be used before an explanation. Okay. So if you had something and you were writing afterwards the reason why, they would come before the explanation. So let's read this and see if we can work out where they're going to go. We saw various animals on our evening walk: badgers, foxes, mice, and an owl. So straight away we've got a list here. So it's telling me that my colon has to come before that list. We saw various animals on our evening walk, colon, badgers, foxes, mice, and an owl. Question 16. Circle the three adjectives in the passage below. All right, so we should know that adjectives are describing words. Okay, they're used to describe nouns. We use them as description. So we've got a noun here. So one way you can do it is find the nouns and then the adjective should come before them. So we've got crumbling, describing the castle. Stood high on the rocky cliff. A rocky hill, sorry. The views over the countryside were glorious. So we've got glorious as an adjective. And we've got hill here, and that's described as rocky. So those would be my three. Question 17. This is a punctuation question, and there are lots of these on the grammar paper, and we need to know how to use commas correctly, how to use full stops correctly, whether we've got our capital letters in the correct places. So one of these sentences is punctuated correctly. So we just have to find that sentence. Swimming, which strengthens muscles in the arms and legs, is great exercise. So straight away, these commas are being used to add extra information, and we've got a relative pronoun here, which, so we're looking for the relative clause. Now, a relative clause should have commas around it. A bit like brackets, it's the extra information we've added into the sentence. Now, the first one, swimming, which strengthens muscles in the arms and legs, this is also extra. So the comma really should go there. So I don't think it's the first one. Swimming, which strengthens muscles in the arms and legs, is great exercise. Right, the commas are in the right places. I'm going to think that it's this one, but we'll just check. Swimming, which strengthens the muscles, no. Swimming, which strengthens, no. So you can see here the commas have been used around the relative clause, and that's the correct answer. Question 18. Another question, interesting they've put these two next to each other, about relative clauses. And it says, use the information in the box to complete the sentence below with a relative clause. So we've gone from punctuating a relative clause now to adding our own one. My uncle is going to plant potatoes. Now, we need to use a relative pronoun. They can be who, which, whom, that, okay? And they're going to come at the beginning of our relative clause. And because it's about a person, the uncle, I'm going to use who, all right? So my uncle, who lives on a farm, and the commas are already there, so I don't need to put them in, is going to plant potatoes. Right, makes sense. And if I take this out, it would still make sense. Just a reminder here that if you're writing about a person, you would need who, but if it was about a place, you'd need which, or even where, or even that. Which sentence is space a verb? Oh, this is an interesting question. I quite like it because we should know that verbs are doing words. But often when children see the word space, it's about the noun space, okay, about the solar system. So to use space as a verb is something they wouldn't often see, but they need to know that it can be used as a doing word. Make space on your table for your laptop. No, that's being used as a noun. Space yourselves out in the hall for PE. Now, this is telling us to do something. So I'm going to guess that that is the correct answer. Our new playground has more space for lining up. No, that's not used as a doing word. Space is an interesting science topic. No. These are used as nouns, but this one is telling them to do something. So that is the verb. Space yourself out. Okay, question number 20. Draw a line to match each word to a suffix to create another word. So these are fairly straightforward. You just have to make sure the root word matches with the suffix, okay, and it makes sense. Recruitment, advertise, classify, and alienate. Now, it does require the children to have quite a wide vocabulary, so they know that what these words are, but they should be able to make sense, because if I put recruitify, that's not a word that many children have ever heard of before. Okay, if I put advertate, that doesn't make sense either. So often children do pretty well on these questions. Okay, we've got a question here, another punctuation question about apostrophes. Now, apostrophes can be used for two reasons. Either for a contracted spelling, that means that we've taken out letters. For example, did not becomes didn't. Okay, they can also be used for possession, which means that something belongs to somebody. So it was Dad's toolbox. The toolbox belongs to Dad, so that's how it's been used. So how is it being used here? So why is there an apostrophe in the sentence? Who's been eating my ice cream? Well, whose is a contraction of who is. So they're basically joining these two words together to show that whose is a contraction of who is. There it is straight away. Possession, no. To show that whose is the contracted form who has, no, because it's a contraction of who is. To show plural possession, no. An interesting question, but if we know how apostrophes are used, then it should be fairly straightforward. Question 22. Now, this sentence is about fronted adverbials. So interestingly enough, they have referred to fronted adverbials here. Which sentence use a comma after a fronted adverbial? So it's about them knowing that the comma has been put in the right place. Now, with fronted adverbials, they're going to tell us how, when, or where something's happened. Okay, we stood at the menu at the noisy, crowded ice cream parlor. Not here, because this has been used to list. When the waitress came over, comma, I asked which flavors were the most popular. Could be this one. I chose chocolate, comma, Mum chose strawberry, no. My ice cream was covered in nuts. No, that's used as a list again. So when the waitress came over, this is telling us when something happened. You've got your comma in the right place, so that is the correct answer. Question 23. Insert a dash into the correct place in the sentence below. Now, a dash comes before extra information, and it usually comes between two parts of a sentence, usually two main clauses, two parts of a sentence that both make sense. If we read this, there should be a natural pause here somewhere. I must repair my backpack. The zip is broken, and I need it for our camping trip. So there is two pauses, but this pause is indicated with a conjunction. The first pause, I must repair my backpack, dash. The zip is broken, and I need it for our camping trip. So, like a colon, the dash has become before the reason why you need to repair your backpack. So a colon and a dash can come before explanations or reasons for things. So that is where it would go. Okay, that is, and if you read it, it feels like the correct place to take a pause. Question 24. What is the grammatical term for the underlying words in the sentence below? In 1961, the first manned spaceflight took place, although a dog called Laika had travelled into space 4 years earlier. Well, straight away, the children should be able to recognize that we've got a conjunction here, and this is a subordinating conjunction. Okay, subordinating, which means that what follows is a subordinating clause. It's where you're adding extra information, but it wouldn't make sense without the main clause at the start. So if I read these, it's not a noun phrase, it's not a relative clause, it's not a prepositional phrase, it's a subordinate clause. Question 25. So here we've got another question linked to clauses. Interestingly, how they're putting these questions next to each other. So they're kind of using the knowledge from the previous question to answer this one. Tick one box in each row to show if the underlying clause is a main clause or subordinate clause. So a main clause would make sense by itself, okay, whereas a subordinate clause does not make sense on its own and will include a subordinating conjunction. For example, when, while, if, because, before, after. If the children don't know their subordinating conjunctions before doing this test, I suggest revising them because they'll help them to identify subordinate clauses as well as conjunctions. Okay, I walked to school with Hazel as we lived on the same road. Well, as is another subordinate clause, and as we lived on the same road does not make sense without the first part of the sentence. That makes it a subordinate clause. Hazel uses a wheelchair, so he went up the ramp. Now, Hazel uses a wheelchair does make sense by itself. You know, if someone said that to you, it would make sense. And what follows is a coordinating conjunction. So you've got two main clauses here. So that one is main clause. Before we entered the classroom, we greeted our friends. Now, before we enter the classroom does not make sense by itself. You need the following part here for it to make sense. Therefore, this is also a subordinate clause, and we can also see a subordinate conjunction in there as well. So that makes it a subordinate clause. Question 26. Draw a line to match each sentence to its form. Again, when it's saying form, it just means it's sentence type. So it's either going to be a question, it's going to be a command, as I've said before, it's that bossy sentence. Statements of facts and exclamations usually begin with the words what or how and can sound something like, how amazing that was, what amazing day it was. Okay. Are you coming to the film night at school? Well, that's straight away, I know that that's a question. It needs an answer. What a shame you can't come. So this begins with the word what, okay, which tells me that it's either a question or an exclamation. But the phrasing of it, what a shame you can't come. You're not asking anything. You're just stating it's that it's unfortunate that someone can't come, and that makes it an exclamation. Don't worry about it. There will be another one next term. Don't worry about it. Now, although it's saying something nice, it's still being bossy in some sense because it's telling someone to do something, and it's using this bossy verb don't. So that makes it a command. There will be another one next term. That is stating a fact. An interesting question, needs a little bit of thinking about, but if you understand what these sound like, process of elimination, you can get this question right. Okay, question 27. Which sentence has the modal verb? Now, a modal verb reflects certainty. So how certain it is that something's going to happen. So they often sound like they might happen. So might is a modal verb. It may happen. It definitely will happen. It could happen. It should happen. So these are all modal verbs because it reflects how certain something can happen. So which sentence has a modal verb? Please help me find the blue pencils. I don't see one there. What are we having for lunch? I don't see one there. Alex had been yawning all day. Don't see one there. I must be at school early tomorrow. So must is definitely reflecting certainty. So that one is your modal verb. Question 28. Explain why the word they makes the meaning of the sentence unclear. Well, let's read the sentence and see if we can work it out. When Kate and Ravi met the other tennis players, they were excited. Now, why this creates confusion is because we don't know who they are. Are they talking about Kate and Ravi, or are we talking about the tennis players? When Kate and Ravi met the other tennis players, they were excited. So it creates some confusion here. So the reason is because we don't know who they is referring to. and that would be a correct answer for a mark. Question 29. Which prefix could be added to all three words to make new words? Now, a prefix comes at the beginning of the sentence and it changes the meaning somewhat. So, prefixes could be things like re, dis, un, im. Okay, so which one would fit at the beginning of all of these words? Discharge is a word. Discycle is not. Discover is. So it would have been dis, but discycle isn't a word. Imcharge, imcycle, imcover, no. Recharge, recycle, recover. So re fits with all three words to make words that we know. So re is our prefix. Question 30. Insert a hyphen in the correct place in the sentence below. Now, hyphens are used to make compound words. Okay, that's words that we can join together that have a new meaning. Okay, so at the museum we enjoy dressing up in the old-fashioned costumes and fancy hats. So these two words, dressing up, can be joined with a hyphen to make a new word. Okay, so that is where my hyphen would go. Question 31. Insert the inverted commas in the correct places in the sentence. I think it's over here, shouted Rena, pointing at the map. Follow me. So children need to know that speech marks, okay, or inverted commas, 66, 99, go around what is being said. Okay, not who's saying it, only what's being said. So I think it is over here, 66, 99. Shouted Rena. Remember, the punctuation has to go inside the speech marks, pointing at the map. Follow me. So we also have more speech at the end. And again, we have to put the speech marks around the punctuation as well. Question 32. Tick one box in each row to show whether the underlined word is a verb, noun, or an adjective. So verbs are doing words. Okay, they can also be being words. Nouns are names of people, places, and things, and adjectives are describing words. So as long as we know what those word classes mean, we can do this question fairly easily. He folded the letter carefully. Fold is something you would do, so it's a verb. The folded letter was put in the envelope. That's describing what the letter was like, so it's an adjective. The letter had folds in it. This is used as a noun, okay, describing the folds. Well, it's quite confusing, really, because you might think this is an adjective, but folds, it can also be a noun. When you're looking at a fold, you describe it, you're saying what the name of it is a fold. So that would be a noun. Question 33. Explain how the comma changes the meaning of the sentence. The second sentence. Did you call Raheem? Okay. Did you call Raheem? Okay, so the comma here can make this sentence, instead of a question, it's saying, did you call Raheem? Okay, so this first one is asking someone if they called Raheem. Whereas the second one, the second sentence is asking Raheem if he called us. Okay, now it seems like a lot for a 1 mark, and it is. And you need to make the distinction between the first and second sentence. So even here, asking someone if they called Raheem, I need to put the first sentence, okay, is asking someone if they called Raheem. The second sentence is asking Raheem if he called. So you need to make the distinction between the first and second one. To get a mark in the mark scheme, you have to say what the first one's doing and how the second one is different. Question 34. Underline the relative clause in the sentence below. So relative clauses are extra information we can add to sentences. They start with the words who, whom, whose. They can start with the words which, or where, or that. So these are all relative pronouns, and we would put them at the beginning of a relative clause. So after her dance class, Jamila has a strawberry milkshake, which she buys from the local cafe. Now, they try to trick you here because often children learn that relative clauses fall in the middle of sentences and surrounded by commas. But remember what I said, relative clauses also must begin with a relative pronoun, and that's where the extra information is being added. So this is a kind of a tricky question because they've tried to trick you a little bit here. All right, the relative clause is actually from the word which onwards. So this here, she buys from the local cafe, is the extra information, and that is the relative clause. So that is the part that you should underline. Okay, but yeah, tricky question. Circle the preposition in the sentence below. So this question is the first, I think, asking about prepositions. Now, I like to say to children that the clue to prepositions is in the word itself, position. Prepositions describe the position of something like on, under, in, next to, okay? But they can also describe a position of something on a timeline. For example, something happened before I got up or it happened after. So they can describe positioning on a timeline as well. Steph trained hard before the hockey tournament. So before is our preposition because it's describing when on the timeline that happened. Concentrating intensively, Emma hit the ball into the net. That's describing the position of where the ball went. Okay, so the clue to these questions is the word position. Position is in a place or position along a timeline. Question 36. Circle the subject in the sentence below. So the children in year 6 learn about subjects, verbs, and objects. It's SVO, and we call this active in the active. And then the opposite is OVS, and that is called the passive. Okay, the subject is always the thing that's doing the action. Okay, the V stands for verb. So after the heavy rain, Mum decided not to water the garden. So the subject in here is the person doing the action, and that is Mum, or is the subject. Decided is the verb, and garden is the object. So it's SVO in that way. If it was in the passive, after the heavy rain, Mum decided to water the garden, it would be after heavy rain, the garden was watered by Mum. So you're changing it to OVS, which is what we need to do for question 37. Rewrite the sentence below in the passive this time. Okay, that means OVS. And often, if we're using the passive, we have to use the word by. So if you're asked to identify the passive, you're looking for the word by. If you have to write in the passive, you need to use the word by. Okay, someone stole the treasure. The treasure was stolen by someone. So you can see what I've done here. This is in the active, SVO, and I've moved the O to the beginning to become OVS. The treasure moves to the beginning of the sentence. Treasure was stolen, and we have to use this word by when we're writing the passive. Okay, active is SVO, passive is OVS, object, verb, subject. Question 38. Complete the passage below in the simple past. Right, simple past should be fairly straightforward. I'm using ED for regular verbs, or I might need irregular verbs as well. So, I, my violin to school, it last week. So, got to bring. I brought, remember in the past tense, not brang, my violin to school. I forgot it last week. And those would be the correct verbs in the past. Question 39, circle the 3 nouns. Now this might sound like an easy question, but nouns can be concrete nouns. These are things you can touch. You can also have abstract nouns, and these are things you can't touch, like the names of feelings, like anger. You can't touch anger, but it's the name of a feeling, so it's a noun. He played the piano with great confidence and rarely made mistakes. So there are 3 nouns in here, okay? Well, first of all, piano is the name of an object, so that's fairly easy to find. Confidence is an abstract noun describing a feeling, okay? And rarely made mistakes. Mistakes is a noun also. So within this sentence, you've got 1 concrete noun and 2 abstract nouns. So when children are learning that nouns are names of people, places, and things, they also need to know that they're names of emotions, okay? Things that are more abstract, because that will come up. Question 40. Which word class is the underlined word in the sentence below? On sunny days, Ben often plays outside before dinner. So this word is describing how Ben plays, okay? It could also where or when. And as I said before, these are adverbs. It tells us how he plays. Ben often plays outside before dinner. Okay, so he does it a lot. So this would be an adverb. Now, some children think all adverbs end in ly, which is a misconception. Not all adverbs end in ly, but adverbs do tell us when, where, or how something's happening. Okay, and this is telling us how often he plays. Okay, so it's an adverb. Write a noun phrase containing at least 3 words to complete the sentence below. Remember to punctuate your answer correctly. So we need a noun phrase, which means using nouns to describe an adjective, containing at least 3 words. So we need 3 words, but we don't need 3 nouns. That's something to read this question carefully. Some opened the door, so a noun phrase. So we could say the bus driver opened the door. We could say his big hands opened the door. We could say the old man couldn't open the door. And that we've definitely got a noun phrase here, because we've actually got an expanded noun phrase because we've described the man as old, but it has to contain a noun. Okay, so that's very important. And I've got more than 3 words here. Question 42. Insert full stops and capital letters below so it's punctuated correctly. Now, this kind of a question looks simple, but a lot of children find it difficult because knowing where the sentences will end, once you put a full stop in, you need to remember a capital letter. It's not just going to go at the beginning or end. It's within this paragraph. So this year, we have been on a number of school trips. My favourite was the Science Museum because we saw some incredible experiments. However, Elise preferred our visit to the Colchester Castle. Now, they've tried to trick you here, okay, because first of all, they've used a proper noun, Elise. So that makes children think that that's fine being a comma because the reason this is a capital is because it's a name. However, if I read this sentence, okay, there should be a full stop in here somewhere. This year, we have been on a number of school trips. Full stop. Capital letter. My favourite was the Science Museum. There should be a full stop there, and that should be a capital. However, Elise preferred our visit to Colchester Castle, and the one that we mustn't forget is the one that goes at the end. So capital here, full stop, capital here, full stop, and a capital letter at the end. There's no capital that we need to change at the beginning. Quite a lot to do there for only 1 mark. Rewrite the sentence below in the active. Remember to punctuate your answer correctly. So active is going to be subject, verb, object. Okay, so we need to make sure the subject is at the beginning. Remember, passive is OVS and usually uses the word by. So I'm guessing this sentence is in the passive. We're going to change it to the active. The local park is maintained by the council. Okay, so the local park is the object, maintained is the verb, council is the subject. We need to swap it so the subject comes to the start. So the local council maintains the local park. Okay, I'm going to take out the word local because that shouldn't be in there. The council maintains the local park. So this now is subject, verb, object. The council is subject, the verb is maintains, and local park is your object. Question 44. Circle the possessive pronouns. Now, what is a pronoun? A pronoun replaces names. Okay, names of objects and names of people. Now, a possessive pronoun is when you're talking about something that belongs to someone. So the ball was ours, it was theirs. Okay, that ball is mine. Okay, it is yours. So all of these are possessive pronouns. Dad told me that Mum's favourite sport is cycling and his is cricket. Tennis is Karen's favourite sport and mine is football. So these are showing that it belongs to them. This is their favourite sports, and we're replacing their names with the words his and mine. So they're the 2 pronouns that you should circle. Question 45. Circle all the conjunctions in the passage below. So they haven't said subordinating or coordinating on purpose here because I'm guessing there's a mixture. So subordinating would be words like which, while, because, before, after, and coordinating will be words like but, or, so, yet, and. Okay, not which, sorry, that's a relative pronoun. Since Billy has started swimming lessons, he has been going to the pool every Saturday and, obviously that's a conjunction, sometimes on Wednesday too, if his dad has time to take him. So that is a conjunction and that is a conjunction. I mean, you could do this question by knowing where the clauses are, but it's better to just know all the subordinating conjunctions and all the coordinating conjunctions, and then it makes it easy to find the ones you're looking for. There is also one more in here. I don't know if you spotted it, but it's one that comes at the beginning of the sentence, and that is since. Okay, since is also a subordinating conjunction, so we would need to circle that also to get this question correct. Don't forget to check at the beginning of the sentence to see if there's also one there. Question 46. Circle a verb that is in the subjunctive in the sentence below. So the subjunctive form is usually used in persuasive writing, and the way that it always comes up is we're in the phrase, if I were you. So if you see this phrase, if I were you, you know that it's the subjunctive, okay? And the verb here in this phrase is always were. We don't say if I was you in the subjunctive, we say if I were you. So the were here is the verb, and that is in the subjunctive. So subjunctive, you're looking for this phrase, if I were you, and it's used in persuasive writing. For example, if I were you, I would make sure that you have your school uniform on. So number 47, circle the three determiners. Now determiners, I like to say, are small words, okay, that come before nouns. Okay, so these are words like a, an, a banana, an elephant, but they can also be quantifying, like I had one pencil, I had two pens, I had many trophies. Okay, so the best thing to do with determiners is find the nouns first, the names of the objects, people, places, or things. There are some biscuits, right? There's a noun, biscuits. So what comes before that noun? Some. All right, so that's my determiner. In this tin, but there are not any chocolate ones. So where do we think the other determiner is? Well, we've got another noun here, tin. So this is a determiner. And we've got another noun here, chocolate. So there is our other determiner. So these questions are quite tricky. If you're getting a determiner question, find the nouns first, and they'll usually come before those nouns. Question 48. Complete the sentence below using the past progressive. Okay, so past progressive. We're using a tense to describe something that is still in progress. So it may have happened in the past, but it's still happening. Okay, and we usually, when we're looking for past progressive, we're looking for the words is, am, or are. Okay, sometimes we're looking for the words were as well. For example, is and am are used for one person, were is used for more than one. Okay, so this plus words with ing on the end. Okay, we were, so we something to talk to our friend, his phone started ringing. We were, okay, we need to use were here, and we need to use the word talk, because we're going to add ing to that. We were talking to our friend, his phone started ringing. So the answer is were talking. We use past progressive to describe something that is still in progress, and you're looking for is, am, and are, or were plus the ing, an ing word if you're trying to find progressive tense. Question 49. Circle the adverb in the sentence below. Although Jane was a speedy runner, she was almost beaten in the race. Now remember, children often think that adverbs end in ly, but that's not always the case. They describe how, when, or where something happens, okay, and they describe verbs. So let's find the verb first. So the verb here is beaten, okay, that's saying something that happened, something that was done, okay. And how was she beaten? She was almost beaten. So almost is the correct answer in this sentence because it describes the verb. Remember, adverbs describe verbs. Adverb, they're like adjectives that describe nouns. They describe verbs. They don't always end in ly. You're looking for how, when, or where words and that describe adverbs. Okay, final question, and it is a tricky one. So it says complete the sentence below in the past perfect tense. So in the grammar paper, they have to learn about lots of different tenses. Past and present perfect is an example that they would need to know. There's only likely to be one or two questions on this, but they still need to know it. So the teacher told the class that he blank not to give them any homework, to decide. Now, we use the perfect form to describe an action that happened or started to happen earlier. Okay? There's present perfect. So when we're looking for present perfect, we're using the verbs have or has. And the past participle would be words ending in en or ed. Okay, she has broken the vase. The vase is still broken and it happened in the past, so that's our present perfect. Past perfect, we're looking for the word had. And we have to use the word had when writing the past perfect, and then we would use a word like jumped with an ed on the end. It's called the past participle. So the teacher told the class that to decide not to give them any homework. We need to use for past perfect the word had, so let's start there. And then because in the past we need ed. So had decided not to give them any homework. Okay, so it's happened earlier, something that's happened earlier, but it's still in the past tense because he decided earlier. So we need to make sure we use the word had. So something to remember. If you're asked to identify present perfect, look for the verbs have and has plus the past participle. Okay. If you're asked to find past perfect, look for the verb had plus the past participle. Okay. In this question, we're asked to write it. So we need the word had. It gives us the verb, so we just need to change that to decided. Read it again just to make sure it makes sense. The teacher told the class that he had decided not to give him any homework. I may do some separate questions on the tricky tense questions that come up in some separate videos, on the tricky tense questions that come up in the Year 6 SATs on present and past progressive, past perfect, present perfect, things like that, because I find it's a subject that needs a little bit more explanation. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching the video. I hope you found it useful. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. There's a load of videos on there on all different types of SATs questions, not just grammar, also maths, full walkthroughs of the papers. If you liked the video, please give it a like and share it with anyone else who's going through their SATs this year. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one.